Holy shit!
Jose exclaimed.
I've seen that hat before.
In a video game? You've played Desert War? He shook his head.
Nope. But I remember now where I heard that name. I was in 9th grade. Think it was around the time Jason disappeared. One day, as I was walking to school, I saw these flyers taped up all around the neighborhood. These were professional flyers, not something someone would create in MS Paint. They showed 2 soldiers fighting in a desert, and watching over them was a creepy-looking skeleton wearing that sorcerer's hat.
I pulled out my iPhone and showed Jose the photo I took of the cartridge yesterday. Was this design on the flyers?
Yeah, it looks similar. The flyers were advertising some sweepstakes. Said that you had the chance to win an early copy of what would be the last officially licensed N64 game, Desert War. There was a URL to visit. I went to it, thinking it might be a scam, but it didn't ask you to enter your social security number or anything like that, just your email, which I did. Never heard back from them. And now you're saying you got a copy of the game?
Well, I did, but it's vanished. All of it except for my dream.
That's crazy. I bet Jason was lured to the game maker's house and killed there. Actually, wait. It's a little too coincidental that his brother showed up with the game. I bet his brother is a serial killer. He probably got tired of waiting all these years without the cops finding any leads, so he's dropping clues.
I know this is the longest of long shots, but do you remember the URL on the flyer? Did they send you a confirmation email that you still have access to? He shook his head.
Think I used AOL back then. My account's long gone. But we better call the cops. This is crazy, man.
Before I called the police, I wanted to do some research. I booted up my computer and searched for articles about the disappearance of Jason Statler. He vanished on the night of Thursday, April 4th, 2002. His mom said that she had wished him good night at around 10 p.m., but when she went to wake him up for school the next morning at 6, his bedroom was empty. There was no sign of a struggle or forced entry. The cops initially thought that he ran away, but his wallet was still in his room and all his shoes were in the front closet. A search party was organized. Bloodhounds were brought in, but they couldn't pick up a scent. The woods were scoured and a dive team searched Lake Laurel and other nearby bodies of water, but no trace of him was ever found. Until today. I tried to find the name of Jason's brother. Jose's theory that he was the killer seemed a little far-fetched, but I didn't have any other suspects. As it turned out, he was only 9 at the time of his brother's disappearance. I found a current photo of him. It was definitely the same guy who came into my shop yesterday, but I doubted that an evil 9-year-old mastermind had made the game. I went back out and asked Jose if he had found the cartridge. As I suspected, he hadn't. I returned to my office and pulled up the security footage from yesterday on my computer. There was no camera in my office itself, but there was one right outside it. The footage showed me entering my office yesterday afternoon, the emerald green cartridge in hand. An hour later, I walked out without the cartridge and locked the door. The camera stopped recording for a few minutes, and then there was another white blur on the screen. I zoomed in again. This time, the skeleton was holding a cartridge. That was the last bit of footage until today. I had tried to convince myself that it was just a bad dream, just a series of strange coincidences, but I knew now that the skeleton was real. And what was I to do about it? I sure as hell couldn't call the cops. This wasn't like the movies. They didn't have some elite paranormal investigation unit. Not to mention that they were hopeless when dealing with mundane crimes. When there was a break-in at my shop a few months ago, they didn't do a damn thing, even though there was footage that showed the suspect's license plate. A burglar alarm went off, but it took them 2 hours to get there. Yeah, they'd be completely useless when dealing with a skeleton. I'd most likely be useless too, but I had to try. I may have knocked off the skeleton's hat, but that was only the first level. I decided my best course of action would be to try to track down the origins of the emerald green cartridge. They weren't mass-produced. No game had ever been published on them. I doubted more than 100 or so were ever made as samples. I emailed all of my contacts at Nintendo, asking if any of them had information on what publishers had requested the distinctive green cartridges. I then tried searching the web again, seeing if there was any information on Desert War that I had missed. As was the case yesterday, I found nothing. Just in case something came up, I set up a Google alert. Finally, I made a Reddit thread, asking if anyone had a photo of the flyers that had been tacked up 20 years ago. Another long shot, but I couldn't think of anything else to do. I considered contacting Jason's brother, but from my interaction with him yesterday, he didn't seem to know anything about the game. Around 4 that afternoon, I received a reply from one of my friends at Nintendo. Apparently, only 3 publishers had requested sample emerald green cartridges. I had emailed contacts at 2 of them yesterday. The third was a small, now-defunct studio called Gooseberry Games. Their headquarters had been located about 20 minutes away in Redwood City. I didn't know anyone who had worked there, but I was vaguely familiar with them, having reviewed their only N64 game, Raucous Raccoon Racing, for the magazine Game Informer in 1999. It was truly an awful game. I had rated it a 1 out of 10. Unsurprisingly, it completely bombed. I went on LinkedIn and messaged everyone who had ever worked there, praying that they would not remember that I was the guy who had slammed their game. In addition, I Googled their names, hoping to find something interesting in their backgrounds. Nothing suspicious came up. The cops gave a televised press conference at 7 that evening. They managed to talk for 30 minutes, but they had no new information about the murder of Jason Statler. My investigation wasn't going any better. None of the people I had contacted from Gooseberry Games had gotten back to me, and I had no other leads. I wasn't planning on going to sleep that night. I didn't think the skeleton would return in my dreams. I thought that with the cartridge gone, he would target someone else. But I didn't want to risk it. I drank loads of caffeine. Normally, that would be enough to keep me up all night, but the Sandman still found me and I was out by 9. I was sitting in a small green rocket ship. A few feet to my left in another rocket was the skeleton from before, Sans hat. He looked real, but the rest of the game, the rockets, the ringed planet in the background, the meteors flying through space, were not impressive. No texture had been mapped onto any of the objects. The meteors looked like solid brown spheres. I pinched myself, trying to force myself to wake from this dream that was not a dream, but, as I suspected, it was no use. It seemed like the only way to get out would be to win the race. A giant green 3 appeared in front of us. Then a 2, then a 1, and we were off. It was honestly the worst racing game ever. There were no power-ups, and the only obstacles were the meteors, which moved so slowly that you would have had to try to hit them. Even though we were in space, you could only move left or right and had to stay on a narrow course that was bounded by invisible walls. Somehow I managed to get way out in front of the skeleton. There was no minimap, so I didn't know how far I had to go, but after what seemed like hours, I could finally see the finish line. A tiny monkey in a spacesuit was waving a checkered flag. I looked behind me. The skeleton was nowhere in sight. When I was nearly at the finish line, the skeleton's rocket materialized out of thin air in front of me. As he crossed the finish line first, my rocket exploded into thousands of tiny pieces. Like last night, I was transported to the skeleton's lair, but this time I was unable to move. The skeleton walked slowly towards me, picked me up, and opened his monstrous maw. I could smell the decay and the rot emanating from it, but no matter how hard I tried, I could not move, could not scream. I was going to die, but it would not be a video game death. I would not respawn, would not have the option to insert another quarter to keep playing. His teeth chomped down on my neck and I felt the most horrific pain of my life before everything faded to black. Then I saw the skeleton's face. There were 3 hearts in front of it. As the skeleton laughed, one slowly faded away. I awoke on my kitchen floor, the clock showing 9:14. I had been out for over 12 hours. It was just a dream, I tried to tell myself. On the floor, a few feet away from me, I saw something glimmering in the morning light. I walked over and picked it up. It was a piece of green metal, the same exact color that my rocket ship was. On it, an image of a skeleton was engraved, along with the initials FS. I knew all along, but I could no longer deny it. There in front of me was incontrovertible proof it was not a dream. I would have 2 more chances to beat the skeleton in the race. There must be some shortcut on the course or some power-up I needed to find. Or maybe I needed to try to ram the skeleton's rocket. Perhaps that was the only way to defeat him. Whatever the secret was, I needed to find it, or I'd beat it, or I'd be. That is, unless I could somehow defeat him in this world, the real world, instead of in the world he created. I checked my email, hoping that someone from Gooseberry Games would have responded. No one did, but there was a Google alert in my inbox. A GameStop in a mall near Fremont, about 40 minutes away, had listed a copy of Desert War on their website.